Hey guys! Part 4 of What If Naruto Became the Hokage Before the 5 Kage Summit. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 10 Shatter. As I write this, I ask myself this question that had plagued me for almost a week. When have I become so heartless? As I stood before the room of the one child whom I swore to protect on the death of my successor, I could feel this gnawing sensation in my heart of what I have authorized to my men. I had no other choice. It was that or kill him. I would not shed the blood of an innocent even if it costs mine. Naruto is young, innocent, and untainted. His mother is his sole source of comfort and company. For it to be taken from him. How could I be so foolish? I have let my wayward apprentice live. I should have been the one to do the sealing instead of the yondaime. It was my responsibility. I've made many mistakes, many decisions that should have taken a different path. Yet I find myself doing things that dare do the same atrocities all over again. Many times, the words of my teachers and my student Jiraiya always reminded me when I was younger. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. I want Naruto to grow without a mental problem, grow up normally unlike the rest of his kind. Not as a weapon of this village, isolated from the family in which I have viewed each and every one of my soldiers and my people. I have been heartless in many a time. But only to the boy that I swore to protect would I be different. His life is more important. The death of his mother is a blow that is hard to recover from in childhood. The boy would become unstable, become even more miserable. For that, I have no choice but to strengthen his mind. Kushina's death. I find it highly unlikely that Danzo was not involved in this in some way, yet I just can't convict the man and disband Root all the same. He has elite followers around him. If he dies, Root would cause too much anarchy. His men would not know what to do. It would most likely be a massacre. I will do what it takes to keep this village safe, though as Danzo and I age further and further, death approaches our doors soon, and until I find a way to stop the man, then I might as well have no choice but to keep him alive a little longer. Disbanding his underground forces did not help. I need to cut the head of the snake to kill it. Sarutobi Hiruzen. Tsunade closed her eyes in contemplation. Sarutobi-sensei had a lot of regrets in his life, a lot of sadness emanating from him. How hard it was to actually strengthen his resolve every time he makes a very difficult decision concerning the village, and he faced it, out of all the leaders of Konoha in the past. Sarutobi had the most trying times to test his mettle and worth. Tsunade could not help but be empathic of her mentor's situation. There were too many decisions that had put Sarutobi's leadership to the test. The Sandaime loved his village. He considered them his children as well, seeing as how he was so fond of them. Tsunade couldn't help but smile as she leaned back on the seat that the current patriarch of the Sarutobi clan lent to her to read Sarutobi-sensei's journals. She recalled herself when she was young, brash and hot-headed, stuck up and conscious about her figure. Together with her was the pale and stoic genius, Orochimaru, unconcerned for others but still had the heart back then to be with them during trying times. Jiraiya, the mischievous, perverted little bastard that she beat up every day for peeking on her in the hot springs, she remembered them so well. Then there was their teacher, Sarutobi-sensei, a genius, the mentor of one of the greatest legends within Konoha, the legendary Sannin. He was younger back then, hair raised back, patient, insightful, calculating yet kind. He was the one who kept advising her to be positive about herself, that her time to bud will come. He was also the one to make Orochimaru walk forward despite the death of his parents. Sarutobi-sensei was the one to bring out Jiraiya's serious side and became powerful himself, despite the fact that Sarutobi also joined the little hellion on their misadventures at the hot springs. Tsunade still seethed at that behavior of their former master. He may be respectable, but he's still a closet pervert. Tsunade laughed a little and let a small trickle of tear escape from her eyes. Those memories were one of the happiest moments she had in her childhood. Her team became her associates, and then became close friends. The closeness that the three of them developed back then was one of the moments that made Tsunade smile at a simple recall. She remembered how they visited Orochimaru's parents at their graves and offered flowers. Jiraiya, though resentful towards his teammate back then, said that he would feel like a total ass for not visiting a teammate's deceased loved one. She recalled when Nawaki died. Jiraiya and Orochimaru were there for her. Orochimaru kept it blunt, but he had assured her that Nawaki died swiftly and painlessly. Jiraiya was the one who comforted her about it, and told Orochimaru to tell the morbid details later. They were there when Jiraiya was forced on his own when his family disowned him, drinking down to a staggering 20 sake bottles, with Tsunade carrying both of her heavily plastered teammates to her apartment. Tsunade stood up when she heard the door being opened slightly. Looking at the corner of her eye, she saw her former master's grandson peeking in. That dude with the bird mask is waiting for you outside, Godame. Yeah, tell him to wait for a moment, while I seal this in a scroll. Your granddad had a lot of journals kept in here, and we need these in order to do something. Konohamaru raised an eyebrow. I still don't get why you and the boss want to read all of Gigi's books. He writes like watching paint dry. He was boring when he wrote this stuff. Tsunade chuckled at this and said, well kid, you'd be surprised just how interesting your granddad was when he was with Jiraiya. Really? Konohamaru asked. Tsunade nodded and continued, yes, now get back to training or whatever there is you're about to do. The seat of Hokage doesn't wait for anyone. With that, Konohamaru nodded and went outside. Now, what to do? I suppose I could read more about Sarutobi-sensei's earlier years in office. I remember he met his wife during his reign on the 3rd year. Then again, we need these documents pronto. Oh well, I'll read about those later. With that, Tsunade grabbed a scroll and began sealing them inside. A gentle booming sound of thunder echoed to the cloudy gray sky. It's going to rain, Tsunade thought. Hokage Tower. After overseeing the progress of the reconstruction effort once again, Naruto sat down and wiped the sweat from his brow. The downtown district was coming along well. The repairs on the tourist destinations were going just as well, and within a few more months, there would be a new hotel about to be established at the side of the hot springs district. Ichiraku Ramen was already built, thanks to Yamato Taishu, and already made a stop there before going back here. Right now he sighed in contentment, and began reading the next set of documents that his clones had been arranging since his absence earlier on. Naruto remembered that he would need to create a war council that involved all of the present ninja clans in Konoha. He had asked his assistant to have a schedule with the ninja clan heads and Tsunade later on to talk about the war that was going to happen. He also had to talk to Tazuna and the others about this as soon as possible to make their country prepared as well. A few moments later, one of Konoha's resident sadists, Marino Ibiki, walked in along with Inoichi and Sai. Ibiki coughed a little and Naruto raised his head and grinned. Good, you three are here. There's something I need all of you to listen to. Nico, that includes you. With that last sentence, the ANBU member jumped down on the floor and kneeling in front of the Hokage, her purple hair gently flowing down. Naruto then began, I trust Danzo is kept quietly within his cell, and isn't talking much, is he? Ibiki replied, No, Hokage-sama, he isn't. Naruto nodded, Alright, Inoichi-san, I want you to do something for me in there. Inoichi raised his eyebrow, and as Naruto put his elbows on the table and leaned in closer, his hands covering the lower half of his face, continued, I want you to purge all of Konoha's secrets from Danzo's head, all of them after probing some that you don't know, including the Uchiha massacre. Inoichi raised an eyebrow at this. What are you talking about, Hokage-sama? Everyone knows about that incident. The massacre wasn't exactly private unless... Naruto then stood up and crossed his arms as he turned his back to the 4 people in the room. What I'm about to tell you must not leave this room, understand? Until I deem it safe should all of you state this without a problem. This S-class secret should never ever leave this room. All of them nodded. Inoichi was about to ask until Naruto spoke. 3 days ago, during the Kage summit, we were attacked by none other than Uchiha Sasuke. All of them remained in pause, while Inoichi looked down. Ino will be upset by this. During his attack, Uchiha Madara made an unexpected appearance. I know that you may think that it was impossible, but he was there. He told me one thing that made me come to speak with all of you here in this tone. Naruto's hand shook as he clenched his fists. I don't know if he was lying or not, but don't put your trust in him at one moment. It's bad enough that we have to do the cleanup for people like Danzo. I don't want us fighting each other because of their mistake. Never doubt that for one moment, that Sarutobi tried his best to protect the Uchiha clan until the very end. I only ask you to continue your faith in the system. I'll try to make things right. Hokage-sama, are you saying that the government has had a hand with the Uchiha massacre? Asked Ibiki, frowning as he said so. Naruto didn't answer. He was silent for a moment before he continued. More specifically, Danzo ordered the genocide of the Uchiha clan in order to stop the coup d'etat that the said clan tried to do. He made sure that the deed be done, and used Uchiha Itachi as the scapegoat for his plans. I know what all of you are thinking right now. Why would they need to do that when negotiations could have been done? Like I said, Sarutobi did what he could, but in the end, every talk ended with failure. Probe his mind, Inoichi-san, find out the truth on the night of the massacre, and then wipe it. Danzo's body is useless. Whatever chakra technique he tries won't work. Until he can find a seals specialist, it would remain unlikely. Ibiki-san, after Inoichi-san is done, guard him as minimal as you can. Find out if he still has subordinates left around here. I'm sure they're all in hiding in preparation for his escape if there are remnants here. The two nodded. Naruto then turned to Sai and the female ANBU member. Sai, since you were the one that leaked the information about Danzo's plans, I want you to remain silent around Danzo. I trust you with this most crucial part of the plan. And that is? Sai asked. To act like a root loyalist and free Danzo once his memory is wiped clean of the secrets that Konoha has. Inoichi had alarm bells ringing in his head at this. What? Hokage-sama, that's dangerous. Danzo may not become a ninja anymore, but his remaining followers still are, if you let him escape. The first thing he's going to do is go after you. Naruto clarified, I know that, which is why Nico is here. She and her team are going to keep me safe if ever that happens, and they will act like hunter ninjas once Danzo escapes the village. Ibiki asked, what's the purpose of this if we're just going to kill him in the end? Truthfully, he was curious at the gamble the Hokage was telling them. It was risky as hell. A lot of variables are on the line here, and for what exactly? He didn't know, but he intended to find out one way or another. Besides, something in him was excited about the whole thing, like adrenaline suddenly began pouring like a waterfall. It felt good. We aren't going to kill him, Ibiki-san. He'll become the bait to lure out a bigger fish. This time, a grin had escaped Ibiki's lips. Now that got him interested. It was nothing like the Hokage's friendly and goofy grin. This is Ibiki, unhappy, wicked, spiteful, and sadistic Ibiki. If he gave a grin, it meant one thing: he's taking pleasure from other people's misery. This being the case, was Danzo, and it made the whole thing all the much sweeter. Some of the people inside the office were unnerved at that. The Hokage looked like he shivered but regained his composure immediately. Right, we are going to use Danzo as bait to lure out Uchiha Sasuke and his group. If he kills Danzo, then it's better for us also. If we could pull this off, Akatsuki would lose more than half of its remaining ninja. That had thoroughly surprised them. Everything that involved Akatsuki was dangerous. It was no wonder why he had an ANBU member be debriefed in the office. Nico, are there at least one kind of every type of specialist there is within your squad? Nico nodded and explained. We have a censor, diversion specialist, infiltrator, sabotage, an assassin, direct assault, scout, and tracker. Good. I need all of your team ready once I give the go signal along with the Niji Shotai. I want your team to perform as Sai's backup if things get dangerous for him. You four are dismissed. With that, all three stood straight and went out the door. Before Sai closed the door behind him, he asked Naruto, I don't understand. Why are you placing this much faith in me, Naruto? Naruto merely answered with a smile, it's because I trust you, Sai. You were the one to mention about Danzo's plans and in turn, save our lives. I'm grateful. Don't worry. I didn't say anything about your actions to that bastard. You don't need to prove yourself to me anymore. You've done a great job. Go take a rest and prepare yourself later on. Sai could only let out a smile as he said to Naruto, thank you, Hokage-sama. Naruto shook his head with a grin and said, get out. With that, Sai was off. Well now, I'm surprised you managed to pull that off, never thought you had it in you, brat. Naruto turned around and found Tsunade sitting by the side of the desk, scroll in hand. I take it you're done in finding Gigi's notes? Naruto asked. Tsunade answered, yeah, though there are some things that you're better off not knowing. About Gigi erasing my memories of my mother? Naruto asked. Tsunade could only remain silent and wide-eyed as she stared at Naruto, who answered truthfully, Danzo told me. Oh, then it was no use. Tsunade sighed as she unfurled the scroll and unsealed the contents within. Soon, countless journals had piled on his desk. Naruto looked at the staggering amount and wondered if he should just be done with it and finally settle the whole thing with a lob of a head or 3. Naruto sighed as he put his hands together to form a few Kage bunshin and let them begin reading as he sat down and began to read himself, along with Tsunade. As he began to read, Naruto could actually feel the regrets that Hiruzen had in his life through his writings, how sad and forced he was in the decisions he had made and what had taken place, particularly those that involved the Second and Third Ninja War. Sarutobi wrote his sadness in his journal in every page, about the people he had sent to their deaths. Naruto didn't understand back then what being Hokage was like. He had slowly began learning about what a leader is like from his experiences. But now, he had finally understood what Sarutobi had to do all along. Every decision that had gone against his principles were regretful, utterly devastating to the man, left a hole in the old man's heart that had forced Sarutobi to maintain that stern and aloof expression that he had so often when concerning his ninjas. But when it came to children, Sarutobi was absolutely ecstatic. He had read when the old man used to visit him, and his mother, when Naruto was an infant, often checked on him when the old man got a chance. Naruto could now understand why the old man had to do it, had to decide to erase his mind clean, for a Hokage, save the many and expense of the few, was ever present in his mind, and Sarutobi, who had been the longest reigning Kage, had proof of that. Naruto had known that particular philosophy ever since Sasuke left the village. It may have been different in the words of his former teacher, but it had the same. Forget about your friend, he's a traitor now, and all traitors must be killed to keep this village safe. Yet, to him, many didn't equate to all. Seeing all of this, Naruto found himself in comparing to Sarutobi. It seemed that they were alike to a degree that it made Naruto understand the position that Sarutobi had so well. Naruto felt somewhat relieved that he never once doubted the old monkey. His teammates, however, it was another story entirely, as Sarutobi narrated in his journal how he felt betrayed and saddened by the power that changed Koharu and Hamura, how he was unable to feel their old presence anymore. As he and Tsunade skimmed through the journals one by one, Naruto had felt his anger brew up a storm from within as Sarutobi wrote in his journals about the night that his mother died. Naruto clenched his fists hard on the table as killing intent radiated in the room from the seams. Tsunade looked at Naruto and said, "Calm down, brat, you can have your turn when we can take them." Naruto gritted his teeth as he continued to read the passages Sarutobi wrote. Every line of regret that Sarutobi made added fuel to the fire of Naruto's anger, blazing like a raging forest fire, consuming Naruto's every bit of patience. "I need to get out," was the only thing Naruto muttered in his head as he stood from his seat, with Tsunade only staring at the boy in a blank gaze. "Fine, cool your head out there, but I want you back here when the war council is about to start. I'm not the one who has to explain to the clan heads that the 5 main hidden villages and the land or iron is currently at war with Akatsuki right now. Don't worry, I'll be back," said the blonde as he closed the door behind wordlessly, without even turning his head as the door fully blocked the elder woman's view. Tsunade could only mutter, "Don't do anything stupid, brat." With Naruto. An angry-looking blonde walked around the village, his head down as his hands in his pockets, clenched into a fist. He was making a beeline straight towards Memorial Stone, the stone of fallen heroes, names of he fallen that were etched into the rock that had died in service of Konoha or otherwise. As he approached there, Kakashi was already standing in front of the said stone as his hands were in his pockets. Naruto looked up. The sound of thunder had yet again roared throughout the cloud-ridden sky. It was getting a bit windy as well, as he now stood in front of the memorial and kneeled down. "Come to pay your respects, Hokage-sama?" asked Kakashi, Naruto merely answered as he touched the stone with his right hand, sort of. That, and I'm looking for something, or rather, someone's name. Your mother, I presume? Asked Kakashi. Naruto didn't look at his teacher but simply nodded. I've tried many times to find her name in it, it wasn't there. I even tried to find her grave, there was none. Kakashi continued ominously. The Jounin looked up and saw the rain beginning to pour down on the village, pelting the copy ninja and the Hokage from its sudden downpour, and lightning began to crackle and thunder boomed into the gray, cloud-ridden skies. This is disgusting, Naruto mentioned in a controlled but undeniably angry tone, as his hands caressed the hard crystal that lay in front of him. I can't believe how two-faced these people are when they place the names of the Uchiha that the higher-ups killed all those years ago, yet they didn't even put the name of my mother who hasn't done a thing against the village. It was then that Naruto had felt exactly what he did when his master was killed, when Danzo had declared his involvement with the death of his mother. Anger was welling inside him like an intense blaze again. This wasn't the rage he had felt before. No. This was pure hatred and malice, the very emotion that Sasuke had thrived in, the very emotion that the nine-tailed beast basked in. For once, Naruto was absolutely close into giving in to temptation and kill them with his own hands. Naruto didn't want redemption now for those who the three people had wronged. No. He wanted one thing that would satiate his desire for revenge. Gratification. He wanted to kill them, to make himself feel better, to honor his own mother who was killed. For once, to actually ram his fists to their chests like frail cardboard, Naruto wanted blood. Wordlessly, the blonde stood up from the memorial stone, his hands balled into fists as rain continued to drizzle down on the village. Naruto's hair now damp and wet as was the rest of his uniform. With a simple turnaround, the blonde waved a simple and wordless goodbye to Kakashi before flickering away. To Kakashi, it didn't bode well to whatever had Naruto set in his sights. Ichiraku Ramen. Konohamaru had just finished his training from earlier, rather it was cut short due to the rain, with the tripod staff-changing monkey, Goku, and had been slowly etching his way to learn about elemental manipulation. Granted, Ebisu-sensei wanted to hold off on that kind of training for a while, but with Konohamaru having such a limited number of jutsu, and jutsu that are far too dangerous for his own good to boot, Closet Pervert Sensei was going to initiate their training in it earlier than expected. He was ecstatic to find that his affinity leaned in closer to lightning. Granted, it sucked that the boss had the advantage over him, but Ebisu-sensei had mentioned that it only implies that he was inclined to learn right-on-based jutsu faster, and anyone can learn and control a secondary element. Konohamaru rummaged through his pocket to find one of the coupons his mother had given him for the ramen he was about to have. He would have preferred something else, but then, Ichiraku happened to be the closest to the usual training ground that Ebisu-sensei and their team frequented. Besides, after a demanding training regimen from the monkey summon, you'll eat anything that is close to you. Ichiraku happened to be in the vicinity, so who was he to complain? A glance to his side when he had finally found his coupon on his side pocket caught his attention as the one that stood outside the ramen stand. Boss? Come to get some ramen? Naruto entered the shop and nodded. Yeah, decided to have some. The paperwork is driving me crazy and I have a lot of cleanup to do. Konohamaru raised his eyebrow at this and added, Bah, it isn't like you have a problem sorting them out, your clones are like the ultimate all-purpose jutsu. Naruto chuckled a little at the young Sarutobi's comment. His self-proclaimed rival had a point about the whole technique. True, but the headaches that come after it makes you finally decide to have some form of sympathy to the old lady and understand why she's a grouch sometimes. Konohamaru smirked, and said while pointing to himself with his thumb, Well, if it's such a pain in the ass then you should surrender the hat to me. Naruto paused for a moment, and a small smile escaped his lips. Somehow, he felt a reminder of his genin days, that determination, that free spirit, that innocence, that light. Naruto couldn't help but feel protective now for the younger generation. He wanted them to survive, not caught up in the conflict made by the older. He hated this stupid situation, he hated the fact that they, the younger generation, would be the ones responsible in cleaning up the cesspool of hatred that they left behind. Frankly, it was a fucked up way of living for them. No can do, you little snot, Not until you actually have what it takes to be one. Naruto replied, flicking his index finger on Konohamaru's forehead, who unfortunately wasn't wearing his forehead protector. The genin rubbed his forehead at Naruto's finger flick in annoyance, and said, "Just you wait, boss. That title will be mine sooner than you expect." Yeah, being Hokage and whatnot, are you people finally about to order? I've got paying customers waiting in line. See. The old chef then pointed to some of the people that was about to enter the establishment that gave a respectful bow to the blonde, who merely raised his hand to affirm their greeting. Ayam merely rolled her eyes to the side. "Ah, come on, old man, couldn't you just leave me alone for a minute with the kid here? I'm about to order anyway. Besides, you should consider it an honor in serving the Hokage," Naruto said with a smile as he thumped his chest. Yeah, where have I heard of that line before? Oh wait, you almost said it for the last 5 years or so that I've lost count, Teuchi replied. Naruto shrugged and sat down, placing his order to the chef, who merely nodded with a smile of his own. Man, you got to go to the summit, boss. It must have been so cool meeting up with the remaining greatest ninjas in this era. Konohamaru shouted. Naruto scratched the back of his head and said, "Not really. If you were there, most of the time it was dealing with eccentricities and annoying politics." Naruto suddenly remembered the Mizukage. Her flirtatious and eagerness would forever be stamped on his head. With a shake of his head, he was brought out of his musings when his order was up. The steam of the warm noodles snapped him out of his thinking and began to dig in. "Oh yeah, if you don't mind me asking, boss, why do you need my granddad's journals anyway? The old bat said that you two needed it for something. She didn't say anything after that, but now I'm dying to know," Konohamaru said between slurps. Naruto, with half-eaten noodles in his mouth, looked up as if thinking about it, and then said, after engulfing the noodles down his throat, "It's really about replacing some of the elders. They're getting old, and with a crisis waiting to happen, well, I don't think they would be able to take it." Konohamaru seemed to take the explanation well. It was then that an ANBU member with an eagle mask had landed outside the small restaurant, and in urgency, he said to the leader, "Hokage-sama, Yudetane Kohara and Mitokado Hamera had managed to run away." The ANBU bowed and kneeled in front of him. Naruto gritted his teeth in frustration as he immediately stood outside, the ramen almost toppling to Konohamaru's lap, who fortunately caught the bowl with his hands and looked outside. "Neutralize them as soon as you can. The last thing we need are the secrets of Konoha being left out in the open for anyone with bad intentions to this place." Naruto roared outside. Konohamaru could practically feel the vibration of Naruto's voice over at the counter. It felt like when Gigi was in a bad mood. He would be quiet and shifty, smoking more than usual, and was incredibly irate. Outside, Naruto had seen the ANBU gave a nod and disappeared in a flicker. The blonde inwardly cursed. He didn't know what came over him like that, but it felt like the most sensible thing to do in such a sudden situation. Granted, he didn't feel the need to care about the two elders, but the way he said it, the way his tone of voice changed suddenly and nonchalantly, commanded the deaths of the two elder people. Naruto wanted to do it himself earlier on when he was at the memorial stone, but stopped himself from causing such an unreasonable amount of tension between him and the people. He had just gained their acknowledgement. The last thing he needed was their fear manifesting itself again in him. He didn't want that to happen again, no. He was better than that. He wouldn't lower himself to the ideas of revenge for personal gain. He was Hokage now, and he would be sticking to his perverted master's ideals till the end. It was his homage, at least, to the master that had showed and taught him many things on not just jutsu and battle alone. But when he said those words immediately, it felt great. He couldn't help but feel like a monster. Once he went back inside, Naruto had placed his money down on the table and then turned back, leaving behind a half-finished ramen bowl. His idea of cheering himself up with his favorite food was gone immediately from his mind. He didn't have the appetite for it, not anymore anyway. Teuchi looked out in concern for his best customer, as did Konohamaru, who ran outside as Naruto made a beeline towards the Hokage tower. Konohamaru shouted to the blonde, "Boss." Naruto turned around and saw his self-proclaimed rival look at him completely serious, then grinned, "Go get him." Naruto smiled and said to the kid, "Don't worry, I've got no intention of letting you do the tough jobs yet." Konohamaru looked at Naruto with a confused look as Naruto left with a simple body flicker. Hokage Tower, later in the afternoon. You sure took your sweet time. Tsunade commented, not taking her eyes off from Sarutobi's last journal. Naruto sat down on his desk, cradling his head with his left hand. Sorry, had a lot of run-ins with some of the people, and I just found out that the two elders had escaped and ran. Naruto replied. Tsunade looked up and scowled. Now what? That's just another pile of problems you have to deal with. Right now, the clan heads are making their way towards here to talk about what is so important that you had to call for an emergency meeting with them. It's taken care of, Bachan. Now let's get this over with. With that, the two grabbed some documents on Naruto's desk and walked outside, closing the office. Once they had arrived at the conference room, they were greeted by the sight of the clan heads, sitting on their respective chairs looking at the Hokage in complacent and bored gazes. Well, it's been a while since there was a meeting of the clan heads right now. Tsum mentioned, a hand cradling her cheek as she let her left elbow rested on the table, a smirk escaping from her lips. Shikaku was slumping on his chair with a bored expression. I don't mind though, the missus was about to harp on me again, and this saved me from another night of nagging. Chusa gave a hearty laugh, obviously recovered from his injuries from the fight against pain, and then looked at Inoichi with a raised eyebrow. What's eating you, Inoichi? The Yamanaka clan head fidgeted a little and said, Nothing, just tired from a day in the intel department. But this does post a concern on what the Hokage is about to address in this meeting right now. We never had this meeting since the start of the Third Great Ninja War. Shibi had mentioned, adjusting his glasses and crossed his arms as he sat behind the table. Whatever the case, if such an event would require all the clan heads to discuss this matter with the Hokage, I'm sure it would be quite a situation, he has heard. Commented Hyuga Hayashi, sitting in a simple but dignified manner on his seat. To his left, there sat Tsunade, and on her left sat the Hokage, who had worn his hat earlier and placed it in front, as he did back then at the summit. I don't like beating this around the bush too long, so I'll be blunt and get straight to the point. The blonde teen was silent for a second and then continued. Akatsuki has waged war against the 5 main shinobi nations and Iron Country. The leader of Akatsuki declared it during our meeting, who now has 7 of the 9 Bija. I don't know how to put this, but I think that bastard has something up his sleeve. An organization like that? I wouldn't put it past them to have some form of backing from a country or two. If they managed to stay hidden for quite some time, and it took Jiraiya-sama's spy network to discover them, it just means that they're that good at deception. Even if it's 7 of the 9 Biju, we can't guarantee that they don't have a plan up their sleeve. Shikaka mentioned and leaned forward on the table, facing the Hokage. Some leaned back and crossed her arms while whistling. Right, if we suspect them to have a country backing them, then we should prepare for a full-scale war, with more emphasis on our SEAL masters. We need more than just a platoon of them if we want to win this war, Tsunade mentioned. All of the clan heads nodded in approval. The problem now would be what country Akatsuki has influence on. Some asked, Naruto suggested, crossing AIM out of the equation right now. We can't just do a takeover of minor countries. All we could do is monitor. It's too dangerous to assume a country is under Akatsuki's control and we attack them as a prevention method. We're here to stop Akatsuki's influence in the world. We're not here to just win. Shibi nodded. I agree. It would be far too dangerous to enlarge Akatsuki's influence any further in the minor countries. A preemptive strike is unwise. Retaliation attacks are too risky, however. The current status of the village can attest to that. Hayashi mentioned, and everyone inside the room nodded. This is far too difficult to decide upon. I say we build up our forces here in the village, create new contingency plans, evacuation routes, and reposition our supply warehouses along with our supply routes not be intercepted this early on. Chusa rubbed the back his head with his right hand. I will not risk it with the village as it is right now. Hayashi stated calmly. Shibi commented, and we cannot draw more flack to us this way, Hayashi-dano. We strike a minor country without as much as a word for it, then we can consider almost all of our allegiances with them null and void. But we have an alliance with the 5 main countries like this, along with Iron Country as well. Some mentioned. May I remind you that even a smaller power, once collected with others, are stronger as one? Shibi countered. Hayashi frowned. Humph. Do not mix your clan philosophy in this. Fearing them is all but a trivial matter that is not in need of concern. I have to agree with Shibi on this one. Inoichi finally spoke. Shikaku nodded as the Nara clan head continued. If you haven't noticed it, the minor countries outnumber us by 1 to 3 in population, along with the fact that they took up spaces between the 5 main countries. We can't relay messages if they are intercepted. We need some of them as allies. A display of power would only make them both fearful and hostile towards the alliance. And what makes you think they could band together? Asked Sim. Surprisingly, it was Tsunade who answered. The 5 main villages had formed an alliance. I don't need to say more. Everyone was silent at that for a few seconds until Chusa spoke. I guess even bitter rivals can become allies if it's such a bad situation. Naruto then said, as he nodded and stood up, it's decided then, we're going to be building our forces here. It keeps intel from leaking and we'll be prepared for a chance counterattack if Konoha is the first target. We don't know what the enemy will be doing, so we'll just have to mobilize our Chunin to gather information around. Tsunade-ba-chan, you'll be in charge on the village while I'm gone. I'm going to be doing some researching in Myobokuzen after this. Naruto then handed a scroll to Tsunade. Give that scroll to Sakura. I'm giving her first solo mission to aim. Once there, here's my instruction for her as I can't be here for a while and these letters need to be to their proper countries as soon as possible. I'm sorry to put this on you, but this is just something I have to do. Naruto mentioned as he then clasped his hands together in a hand seal after biting his thumb and drew blood. Boar. Dog. Bird. Monkey. Sheep. Kuchios no Jutsu. Naruto shouted as he slammed his right hand on the table. Smoke had exploded on the table in front of him, drawing forth 2 toads. Fukasaku-sensei, I'm ready. Naruto mentioned, and Fukasaku nodded. Tsunade suddenly stood up. Hey! Wait a minute, how long am I going to put up with this? Naruto looked at Tsunade for a moment, and then said with a grin, until I come back. That's for an indefinite time period, brat. I'm not putting up with the job for more than a month. It's 1 month too many. You worry yourself too much, Bachan, you'll be fine. Besides, I have another toad summoner here in case there's an emergency. Naruto gave an offhand reply. That's not it, Naruto, this about the fucking workload. Tsunade raised her hand in exasperation and then pointed to the documents that were on the table. Please, you just don't want to sign those papers. Naruto subtly rolled his eyes. Of course, that didn't go unnoticed from Tsunade. Of course I don't. I don't want to mess with that thing again. And you're about as lazy as I am about paperwork. You just have a jutsu that can deal with it. Whatever you say, Bachan. Naruto gave a cheeky smile as he placed his hands on the back of his head and went out. Tsunade merely grumbled. If there was one thing that Naruto remained in his rule, it was that he was still as stubborn as a mule. Once he got out, Fukasaku had jumped and perched on his shoulder. The wise old toad spoke to the blonde. There's a special dome built in Myobokuzen for you to use there. Naruto-chan, are you really serious about this? This is different from training in your sage mode. The chances of you dying and setting the beast free are high. We've already discussed this, Fukasaku-sensei. I'll bet everything I have, and I'll have to get stronger. No matter what, stronger than Sasuke, stronger than Madara. And if I have to, I'll have to be stronger than the Rakudo Sannin. Naruto then looked intensely up on the afternoon sky as he shouldered his backpack and nodded to Fukasaku. Within a second, a puff of smoke emerged from the ground that Naruto and Fukasaku stood on. As the smoke dissipated, both master and apprentice were gone. Myobokuzen. As soon as he felt the pull from the reverse summoning suddenly stop, he found himself in a dome made of stone. He looked up. At the very top of the dome was a simple opening above, showing a portion of the sky above. And there stood in front of him were Fukasaku and Shima. Along with them was the book of Fuinjutsu that he had read earlier. He had remembered that he still had to read it about halfway. He had to read and study more, amalgamate more seals and create sealing techniques that only involved his hands. Written seals were merely the tip of the proverbial iceberg. Right, Fuinjutsu it is then for now, said the blonde as she rolled up his black long sleeve and began to sit down on the floor. It was going to be another long and complicated training regime for him. But at least he knew that he was sure to find his answer in this book. Chapter 11: The First Movement. It had been quite a sight to see when she had finally reached the village that had raised the one responsible for Konoha's status as it is right now. AIM had a glorious sight from afar. It looked more metropolitan than Konoha was. The pipes that scaled the building up made it look like the city came from one of those steampunk novels. Sakura had managed to get in contact with Konan a few seconds ago. Now that she was finally settled down after that long trip, she awaited Konan's presence. "I'm sorry I kept you waiting, Haruno-san," mentioned Konan as she walked inside. Gone was her Akatsuki cloak, and instead, her cloak was now plain dark in color. It's no problem, Konan-san." Sakura raised her hands in gesture as the older woman sat down. "Hokage-sama wanted to talk to you about what happened in the summit concerning your former associates," Sakura mentioned as she handed over the scroll to Konan, who began reading the contents. Silence befell the room, and Konan gently rolled the scroll, her head bowing. "So it's finally happened. I didn't think he would speed up his plan this much." Konan closed her eyes solemnly, feeling the guilt of the situation finally occurring in the masked man's plans. "Uchiha Madara, the more I think of that man, the more I realize how twisted he is based on his ideals." Konan trailed off and looked outside. A flock of birds had flown up in the sky. Sakura mirrored the paper woman's gesture and looked to her left. "Tell me, Sakura-san, how is Naruto-san faring these days?" asked Konan. Sakura replied, "He's doing fine. He left after giving this letter to me to relay to you. Tsunade Shursho mentioned that he was going to train and research on seals. He wants to end this war as soon as he can, and he's doing what he feels what he needs to do." Konan then stifled a small smile as she began paper folding on the table that sat between them. Konan then spoke, "You know, Naruto-san is like Yahiko in many ways." "Yahiko?" Konan then looked at Sakura, who was looking at her in a confused manner. My mistake. Yahiko was a friend of ours." "Was?" "He was killed right before Nagato and I joined Akatsuki. He was a very dear friend of ours," Konan mentioned as she continued to paper fold. "I am sorry." "Don't apologize, Haruno-san. It was not you that dealt the blow. Yahiko was the bravest out of the three of us. He was assertive, brash, and took command of things when it got tough. If it wasn't for him, I don't know what would have happened to us when we were children." Konan then finished her paper folding and revealed her finished product. A paper crane. "When he died, Nagato and I were devastated, but out of the two of us, Nagato was the one who never got over his death. Nagato looked up to Yahiko, even I did, but I realized sooner that I couldn't wallow in that sadness. When Nagato vowed to continue Yahiko's dream, I followed him. It wasn't the same, but we knew that it was what Yahiko wanted for us," Konan then said to Sakura, who by now was looking at the floor. In Nagato's perspective, he just wanted to protect those very few people that he considered friend. "How about you, Sakura-san? I can tell that you have the same type of pain as I do. All the time you were looking on the floor and avoided looking at me, as if you know what it likes to lose a friend." Konan mentioned. Sakura let out a hollow laugh and said, still looking on the floor, "It's funny how I found a kindred spirit in you, Konan-san. In a way, yes, but instead of being killed, he ran away from home." "Uchiha Sasuke, I presume?" Konan asked. Sakura didn't answer. She chose the silence to answer for her. "I don't want to come to a point that we would kill each other just to stop this madness." Sakura then held her head with her hands and bowed. Sasuke had been a part of their lives. They had stuck with each other through tough times, and those memories still lingered in her mind like photographs. "Do you wish to save him, Haruno-san?" Konan asked. Sakura didn't answer yet again for a moment. She looked at Konan silently, feeling herself numb from Konan's question. Flashback. "I couldn't reach to him, Sakura. I'm sorry." A 12-year-old Naruto mentioned in front of her, covered in bandages and wearing the hospital gown. "If Sasuke keeps doing these kinds of things on his own, then I can consider him a threat now, a threat that will take away something important from me," Shikamaru had said to her as he walked back to his home. In his right hand was the lighter of his former mentor, reminding him of the fate that was placed on the son of the third Hokage. I can't pardon him, Sakura. I'm sorry. He's an even bigger idiot than Naruto. What the hell will he accomplish after this? Doesn't he know what Akatsuki wants? Kiba remarked. What do you know? Do you know how difficult it was dealing firsthand when you found out your former best friend joined that bastard's organization? I don't want to stay on a village that keeps holding me back. If you want to get in my way, then be prepared to pay for it. Sakura steeled her resolve. Did she really want to save Sasuke? Sasuke, the person that had abandoned them, the same person that almost stabbed her in the chest if it wasn't for their captain, did she really want to save him? Who will you save him from? Conan asked. Sakura looked up at the blue-haired woman. Conan looked at her seriously, waiting for a reply. Sakura. Thank you? Sakura managed to let the words come out of her mouth and finally gave her answer. I want to save him. I want to save him and smack some sense into him. I want to save him from Madara, save him from himself, make him realize that leaving us behind was a horrible choice in the end. Conan smiled, as she turned around and grabbed her scroll. Within a few seconds, the crane from before enlarged to the size of a pigeon. Conan drew a simple storage seal at its side and sealed the scroll inside. Then rise up, Haruno-san. Follow me and I shall aid you in your trial. Don't fear. I already gave my answer to the Hokage. I will only grant you what I can, but rest assured I will teach you everything that I know. It may or may not be enough for you to do anything good, but if it means you do everything in your power for the sake of your loved ones, then I will support you. Sakura looked at Conan in a questioning gaze, as she suddenly stood up from her seat. Why would you? She asked. Conan bowed her head, a knowing yet simple smile escaped her lips. Because you are like me, Sakura, yet unlike me, you still have those two in your life. They are still living. If there is one thing that I have learned from Naruto-san, based on mere observation, is that as long as there is life, there will always be hope. So don't lose your determination yet, Haruno-san. Sakura smiled at that, finally relieved of the fact that she can have a chance to save Sasuke, to relieve Naruto off with the burden of his promise to her. If Naruto couldn't be the one to drive some sense into Sasuke, she will be the one to do so. Even if it meant she was the one going to fight Sasuke. With a cleared head, Sakura followed Conan, who had walked outside. Conan looked serene, at peace as she walked the streets of Aim. At her side was the pink-haired Konoha shinobi, who had looked around the village as the citizens of Rain stared at her in curiosity. The Angel of God looked at Sakura and said, it has been a while since they had seen foreign shinobi, much less from Konoha. Ninja from Konoha tend to remind them of unpleasant times. Sakura could only nod, and smile at a small child that was staring at her. The child smiled back before running off. As they continued to walk, many of the populace greeted Conan and bowed, acknowledging her as the Angel of God. Sakura could literally feel the admiration and respect to the woman coming in waves. It felt different from Tsunade's, who commanded in full force and boosted morale with fiery words. Conan's came off like pristine water or a gentle breeze. It was silent, gentle, and gave off feeling of comfort and tranquility. After what happened to Nagato, do they still consider him a god? Sakura asked. Conan never looked at Sakura as she answered that question. The current people of Aim believe that Nagato is a god, all because he did the unthinkable. He defeated Hanzo the Salamander. Nagato saved his followers from the despair that Hanzo brought. It is only natural that they look up to him. Who has defeated someone they view as invincible be considered a higher being. A god among men, that is what many people of Aim viewed Nagato. He was as their ideal, and it will take a long time for them to forget that sentiment. It was best to let them continue on in this view, let them think what they wish, as long as they don't tarnish Nagato's name. Conan said. I see, so to not distraught them of such a strong belief in pain, you wanted them to continue that belief for a while. Sakura commented, and Conan nodded. Yes, only discord awaits those whose beliefs are crushed. Let them think like it for a while. I would not dissuade them. Sakura could feel the waves of Conan's convictions going through to her. Sakura could feel just how decisive the woman in front of her was with regards to the people around her, to the people that mattered. Even if it had hurt Konan due to Nagato's death and ultimately leaving Konan all by herself, Konan resolved that she would remain strong not for herself, but for the people that Nagato and Yahiko left behind. But me. I feel like an absolute coward. Sakura thought to herself. She realized just how her indecisiveness had managed to hurt Naruto, how it took Sai, of all people, to figure out just how much the three of them, Sasuke, Sakura and Naruto, managed to hurt each other in an indirect manner. Sakura could feel the loathing of herself surfacing its ugly head inside her, how it was taunting her about what she was doing, to herself, to Naruto, to everyone. Quit lying to yourself. You know as much as I do that there would never be hope of convincing Sasuke to come back. It's become more trouble than it's worth. Her inner voice told her. Sakura bowed her head and frowned. Are you still after his heart? Are you still in love with him? Did you forget what he did to you? To Naruto? To our team? It continued, mercilessly plaguing her with memories of their second encounter as Sasuke was about to deliver a sword straight to her chest. After all the sacrifices we made, after all the hard work we had gone through, it seemed that it was never enough, never more than enough. It's time to change that prioritized goal. Sakura looked at her gloved hands for a moment, and clenched it together. She was right, saving Sasuke mattered. But now, she wanted to be strong, not for Sasuke, not for Naruto, but for myself. Sakura thought as she steeled her decision. She would not go after Sasuke anymore. Rather, she would be fighting for the sake of all that is important to her, not just Sasuke anymore. Stopping at the edge of the city, Konan turned around and looked at Sakura, who was looking at her seriously. Konan gave a tiny smile, and grabbed a scroll from her cloak. This is one of the technique scrolls that was gathered during the years that Akatsuki was still composed of 9 members and gathered techniques first before the capture of Jinchuriki. This was Kakuzu's technique that allowed his body to become as solid as steel. Konan then slipped a small paper from her hand and handed it to Sakura. Sakura accepted the small paper and nodded. It was a test to determine her elemental affinity. She had seen Kakashi perform the same test to Naruto, and wordlessly, she applied her chakra to the paper as Naruto once did. She felt herself turn pale as she saw that the paper crumbled to dust. Konan, however, smiled. It was a perfect match for what she had in mind. Myobokuzen, 3 months later. It had been grueling. The training he did on himself had been far more than tiring. It left him absolutely drained every night. But with every day's worth of rest, he had gained months or even years of experience in a day of his training. The training with his clones were effective. He could now do strokeless fuinjutsu, and could theoretically seal away a massive object with just flicks of hand seals. But now he faces his next hurdle. Standing in the middle of the dome where the only present beam of light descended upon him, he clasped his hands together in a prayer-like stance, removing his haori and flak jacket, his eyes closed, as the scroll toad stood towering before him, arms crossed. Maintain your molding and concentrate. Without a third medium, you will be the one to pick up the slack. You'll act as the controller and the output. Once I turn the seal open, you're on your own. Just make sure that once you direct the chakra, your natural energies would be gathered by then. You'll only have one moment. Do you remember the seals that Jiraiya weaved? Naruto nodded, sweat falling from his brow, grimacing on the difficult task. As he had reached the peak of his molding, he heard the toad scroll mention that he was about to begin. Naruto affirmed with a simple nod. Chakra suddenly began running its course through him. As soon as he felt that moment, Naruto began weaving seal after seal with his hands, controlling the sudden flow of chakra that seemed unbending to his doing. It felt like colliding with the ocean waves, smashing against himself, as wave after wave pulverized the shore. Each gesture of the hand seals brought him closer and closer to his limit of control. He could feel the yuki starting to overflow into his system like a dam that had suddenly burst open its wall. Doing the last seal, he immediately stopped and began to gather natural energy, as the fox's chakra started to stream its way in his coils. In his mind, he couldn't think of anything other than to suppress the sudden flow of demon chakra. He flinched, as it suddenly grew hotter. So, you think you can make me bow down and lend you my aid, human? The voice asked, deep and malicious, scrutinizing and condescending. Naruto turned around, and came upon a brass gate, as large as any building that stood beyond 10 stories. There in the middle was a small paper with the word seal written, as if it was the lock that kept the cage closed. Inside, 2 pairs of blood-red eyes, as sinister and as menacing as its amused grin that showed its sharpened teeth. Red miasma began dancing below its murky and shallow waters, rising up as it turned to bubbles and began crawling out of the cage towards Naruto. An amused chuckle escaped from the cage, as it stared down on its host. You, who struggle to find what is and what isn't, you whose own morals are now blurred by your position, where your choices lead you to doubt yourself more that lead to a path of weakness, you, who cannot grasp the fact that one of your own betrayed you. Naruto snarled at that comment. The Kyuubi continued speaking to the blonde. Pathetic, truly such a worthless flesh bag that stands before me. I should kill you now. At least it would be more of an act of mercy rather than cruelty. Naruto continued his angry stare at the monstrous fox, as the miasma and red bubbles began to crawl its way towards him, with the waters from beneath his feet beginning to rise. Foolish mortal, for you to attempt to subdue me, I give you credit. None have been so courageous or foolhardy enough such as you to attempt this, especially one who has not gained the ability to control me, but your folly ends now. Know that you shall never see the light of day again, and I shall be free of this damnable prison. Naruto smirked as he slowly walked towards the cage. The water on his knees rippled silently. The red bubbles and miasma gave way, the effect of the sage chakra repelling the red chakra finally slipping through the gaps of the bars. Keep telling that to yourself, you stupid fox. I'm here to finally show you who the boss around here is. And all in a manner, I'll show you that even an insignificant human like me can surpass even the expectations above the norm. Nature isn't static. The Kyuubi sneered. Interesting. You make it sound like you're sure of yourself. The only question is, can you, actually? Can you control me? Can you use my power? Can you withstand me? Raising its left foreclaw, the monster swung its claw down to Naruto. That is only wishful thinking. I am the Kyuubi no Kitsune, I am chaos incarnate, with a single wisp of my tail. I cause death and destruction in my wake. No one will control me anymore, and no one. Not you, and certainly not those damnable Uchiha anymore. The gigantic claw splashed down the rising waters, pushing the liquid up from the claw as the initial shockwave violently rippled around it. The Kyuubi remained silent as it viewed Naruto under it. Naruto had stopped the claw with both his hands raised. He was squatting as he did so, struggling from the sheer power that the Kyuubi had dealt. Now you interest me more, brat. That simple attack should have rendered you unconscious and allowed me to take over your body. The Kyuubi looked around, and saw that the water levels were rising once again. It gave an amused chuckle as he said to the blonde that was struggling from his claw. You do understand, don't you, Gaki? As time passes, the key to your seal is slowly turning it open. The gradual rising of the water is proof of that. Every time the water rises, you succumb to me. The paper seal that acts as a lock is slowly peeling away. By the time the water reaches the level on your chest, I would have consumed you completely. Naruto replied between heaves, yeah? So what? Naruto suddenly began pushing the giant claw. Am I supposed to be afraid? Am I supposed to fall down and accept my fate? Slowly, inch by inch, second by second, Naruto was pushing the claw away. I've thrown my fear away when I promised myself to not back down on any fight. I've fought my way, tooth and nail, and more than once, I showed everyone that I'm not just an idiot from a no-name clan. Impossible isn't a word for me. It doesn't even exist in my vocabulary. Naruto said that with a smile as he tossed the claw away and crouched low. Now, I've become the Hokage, the strongest in my village, the man at the top. I've done it, I made it here, and I'll be damned if you ever take that dream away from me. I'll only stop when I want to. Not even you can keep me. Naruto suddenly jumped, disappearing in a blur and appearing just beside the Kyuubi's long mouth. Heaving his fist back, Naruto shoved his fist straight to the fox's face. The fox reacted as the punch had hit him, its head slightly heaving to the side from the blow. I see you can throw a decent punch. But it still won't be enough. In its berserker-like trance, the nine-tailed beast howled inside its cage, slashing down below with its 4 paws, on Naruto, who was still in midair. Seeing nothing to be replaced with, he had met the brunt of the attack head-on and felt the weight of each of its claws on his shoulders, throwing him down on the waters below, splashing in it in a tremendous show of force. The Kyuubi laughed from its standing position, as it said, "In the end, I still am far more superior than you, whelp. Nature deems it so, and it shall always be obeyed. No ordinary human could ever control me." At that instant, 3 geysers had immediately burst from the waters below, signaling Naruto's vitality. 3 clones descended upon the 9-tailed fox, all with hands forming a giant Rasengan. The Kyuubi evaded, hopping left to right until all clones missed him. The 9-tailed fox sneered some more, as it swiped the clones with its paws and tail, effectively dispelling them. That is, until the real one jumped from the water that was below its exposed underbelly, with a full, gigantic Rasengan formed and struck the said abdomen of the Kyuubi. The Kyuubi yelled in its pain, sending it flying from the force of the attack, hitting the metallic and stone-like roofs of the minescape. The monster fell down on the significantly higher level of water below, creating a gigantic splash all around. As the water descended, it looked like it was raining inside. The Kyuubi immediately recovered, its wounds suddenly healing at an exponential rate. The Kyuubi grinned. No one has ever managed to deal something like that to him for over 100 years. This has been the gift I have given you so long ago. Yet you are still this weak. I gave it to you because I knew you would be prone to injury. Your reckless attitude was your downfall. And I knew that I would be forced to share this ability to you if only I were to survive before finally getting my freedom." The Kyuubi then drove its claws once again on the blonde, this time sideways with its left forepaw. Seeing this immediately, Naruto jumped, only to be met with a large headbutt courtesy of the monster, as it literally crashed onto Naruto, who was unprepared to block. The blow sent him careening towards a larger part of the iron gates. Naruto could feel the pain coursing through his body as he had hit the brass gate in a bone-shattering attack. Granted, he wouldn't receive that much injuries as it was his mind, but the mere fact that he could still feel the pain was enough to stun him as he slid on the wall straight down on the waters below. "Your ideas are so delusional as the belief of that dead master of yours." Naruto, who had regained his senses, snarled as he got up from the water. Wet and angry, he looked at the monster fox in absolute hate. "Don't insult the perverted hermit's ideals like that. Fool! It is natural for man to kill their fellow men. Men are, by nature, inherently evil. Greed fills their souls like a despot of sickness and virulence. It spreads to each human's heart, their pride, their lust, their gluttony, hate and envy on their own kind like a disease that can never be cured. Nothing is worth saving these abominations from themselves. They were never in danger to begin with." "Shut up. You may be an ancient being, but you don't even know how humans think. You just judge us by the way you see in your observations. If you're a higher being, then your views on us lowly creatures can kiss my ass. You don't know how to be human. You will never learn how to be one." Naruto shouted. He dashed forward, faster than before, and jumped up. The Kyuubi opened its giant maw as it swooped low and attempted to bite Naruto, only to receive water as Naruto reflexively landed on top, forming another set of 3 clones. The Kyuubi rolled to the side, intent of flattening its host. Naruto jumped, along with his clones, with each clone transforming into weapons of any variable. As wisps of chakra began gathering inside the gates of the Kyuubi, the boundary of human and Bijou, everything around the entire area began to crumble. Outside of Naruto's mind, the uncontrollable surge of chakra outside made both Fukasaku and Shima shudder at the evil chakra pouring out like a waterfall. As they stared at Naruto, who stood in the middle of the sealing chamber, who was standing on all fours, his red chakra cloak taking form and disappearing at the same time, struggling fiercely the longer it took. His skin was starting to break down and reform, as he bled down trickles of blood all throughout his body, dripping to the ground and staining it with his life fluid. Naruto growled and roared as he grasped and held his throat, rolling down on the ground from the pain. "Endure it, Naruto-chan. Don't let that monster consume you." Shima shouted from her position. Fukasaku added, "He can't hear ya, ma. You're just wasting your breath." "Pa, why are you always antagonizing on everything that I do?" Shima griped. To his end, Fukasaku shook his head as he held it with his left hand. It's because most of what you do is always pointless, her spouse pointed out. Oh, like how my kitchen duties at home are pointless, Shima countered, obviously offended. Only when it's Water Strider's night. I told you to get rid of the hind legs. You know how much they irritate my gums. Then you should remind me earlier. I keep reminding you 2 hours before cooking the things. You just forget about it. And you call the great sage a forgetful old coot. What? I am not old, you old coot. Who are you calling an old coot, you old coot? The two began to squabble like the married couple they are. Gamakichi kept watch the furthest from the ceiling chamber, and sighed when he saw the elders argue like children. Elders, how much time has Naruto allowed us before finally interfering with the ritual? Gamakichi asked. The two looked at each other, then to the son of the frog boss, and Fukasaku replied, Naruto has given us as much as 15 minutes. Those minutes are the most crucial part, since it is the maximum amount of time Naruto has on his Sage Mode on his own. Shima then continued, Sage Mode may bring a human closer to the level of a Bijou, but it does not guarantee that you can stand toe-to-toe with one. The mere thought of a human taking on a tailed beast is utterly ridiculous. Yet, the thought of controlling one is even more. Fukasaku nodded in a grim expression. Much as we hate to do it, before the fox cloak manifests itself into the fifth tail state, we are going to have to kill Naruto. He said that if he fails, then this is the only option left for us. Not only would the Kyuubi be prevented to escape, it would destroy Madara's plan. Gamakichi swallowed hard as he looked onto the form of a feral-looking Naruto, crouched in all fours and growling as he gripped the dirt below with his hands, digging deep into the ground. The Toad Scroll, however, was still transferring more and more chakra. No, not done yet. There's still more of the Yin chakra left. Accumulate it and control it, Naruto. Don't waver. The only answer from the blonde came out in a bellowing growl, as a shroud of chakra shield began to surround him in a dome. Naruto looked around, and began banging the shield with his hands-turned claws, swiping and pounding on the ethereal wall for release. Naruto's mind. See what lies before you, as the greatest of the tailed beasts. I am the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Cower and realize the insignificance of your own existence compared to mine. The Kyuubi bellowed as it stared down at the slumping form of the blonde by the gate. Its spiteful crimson eyes gauged the blonde down on the ground and fashioned its own toothy, foxy grin. It gave an amused chuckle before Naruto, who now stood in steady support by the gate. The water level inside was reaching to his abdomen, as he started breathing heavily. Didn't you hear me earlier? Naruto managed to ask between gasps for air. Naruto strengthened his legs as he remained stood. I threw away my fear long ago. I've lost that ability when I realized that if I can't be the one to bite the kunai, who will? Naruto instantly smirked at this as he said to the Kyuubi, eyes filled with determination. I keep staring at my back and I see all the people that rely on me, they're counting on me. Because of that, I am not letting them down. If you push me down, I'll just stand up again and stare back at you. It's my pride, my will. The Kyuubi stared down on the blonde that stood miraculously amidst the gathering sea of chakra that kept corroding his mind like a poison. Its eyes narrowed down towards Naruto in a scrutinizing but wordless gaze before giving of a deep and sinister chuckle. Pride is the downfall of all creatures. Your pride is your weakness, brat. It will be your doom. Naruto smirked back. The pool of water was inching its way closer to his chest. Then was it pride that struck you down 15 years ago? Was it your pride that told you to face the Shinigami head-on? The Kyuubi growled in hatred and snarled at the blonde. You will pay for that mockery, brat. Red chakra began to bubble on the surface of the water as it inflated and popped over each other. Naruto's smirk turned into a grimace as he began clutching his shoulders from the sudden spike in the pain that the chakra was delivering to him. His knees felt like jelly for a second, as he almost came plopping down on the water's head first. He looked up at the scowling face of the demon fox. The chakra that the fox had let out was potent. It seemed that as time passed, the gradual increase of the chakra pool from Kyuubi to his own was staggering him. Now with the Kyuubi's Yin chakra essentially bonding on its Yang counterpart, and had slowly started trying to overpower his own chakra. Naruto stared up wearily over to the gigantic red kitsune, As it opened its gigantic maw and swooped down below to the blonde, intent on consuming Naruto completely. Grass Country. With the creation of the 5-village alliance with the backing of Iron Country, majority of the minor countries had started growing fearful of the situation now that the 5 most powerful hidden villages had joined forces. Most of the minor countries that had animosities towards a village that one of the main shinobi countries broke of their alliance, to them, nothing was worth the effort of cooperating with an old enemy that caused atrocities within their land. They didn't want anything to do with the alliance. It was merely that simple fact that had created rifts between the 5 main villages and the rest. What had happened in order to force such a big move from Konoha, Kiri, Suna, Kumo, and Iwa? But the most dreadful question that had the daimyos of the minor countries along with the leaders of their respective villages had was, after their focus on such a monumental crisis, who was going to oppose them? So it was then realized, slowly, but surely, that they, the minor countries, were left absolutely vulnerable for the alliance to invade them at any time. It was frightening, and it brought any leader of a minor country down to their knees in despair. Paranoia had set in, and soon, fear reared its ugly and spiteful head upon the inhabitants of the smaller countries. However, some of the countries realized that they had 2 important factors that the major countries didn't have: the connecting dots that made communication and coordination in each of the countries. The major countries suffer in communication gaps. Most of the time, relaying messages from one village to another required that they cross a country or 2. The next advantage that they realized was that each ninja village that they had accounted for more numbers in their ranks that constituted to a bigger population than any of the major countries had. Now they realized that with those advantages, they could oppose the alliance, if only they could move towards a united front. It was then that each minor country had began clamoring letters and proposals to each other, alliance letters, political allegiances, internoble marriages, anything that would preserve the future of their country. Then it had come to this, a meeting with the daimyos, village leaders, and all political figures of willing and participating minor countries that consisted more than 80% of them, now held a summit on their own on Grass Country. Granted, it wasn't as what they had expected, but it was enough to put them on even grounds against the alliance. This meeting of the Federation of Minor Countries has now come to order, said the host village leader. The man looked none too intimidating, as he wore the standard shinobi uniform. A teal-green vest was the distinction of his village, and the dark colors of his long-sleeved shirt and pants. He wore a scarf and a hawari that signified his status as the leader of the grass village. He adjusted his spectacles and looked up at his daimyo, giving him a piece of paper. The leader cleared his throat and spoke. "We don't know what has occurred that forced the alliance to suddenly happen like this. Public statements mention that they want to counter the Akatsuki threat, a reason which some of the minor villages didn't want to participate, particularly Aim and Taki, Waterfall. But we don't know the true agendas that they are making." One of the daimyos stood from his seat and said, "That's it? That's the reason they created an alliance? To counter a mercenary workforce? I may not know much about shinobi and their line of work, but to have such a weak excuse for forming an alliance, it's sending all the warning signs all around me. Being situated near a very aggressive village like Kumo is far too close for comfort. I will not stand by and let my country be dissolved." "Then how about you take my proposal then?" asked a voice that was echoing throughout the room. All of the leaders and daimyos looked around, trying to find the presence of the unknown person. All present within the room suddenly stood alert. With the village leaders of their respective homes stood up and frowned towards the person that had suddenly appeared from nowhere. The hem of his black robes flapped from the gust of wind that he had appeared in. The spatial distortion on behind him vanished, as the man calmly strode towards the large circle of leaders that all looked at him warily. Madara smiled beneath his spiral orange mask, his visible Sharingan eye squinted as he stared at each of the leaders around him. They were on edge, as each member's anxiety grew with the sound of each step that he took. Black robes as dark as the starless night, and clouds adorned with the color of blood. "There's no mistaking it. It's Akatsuki," one of the members said, as all of the daimyos cowered in their seats. "Like I said, I have an offer that you might possibly be interested in," Madara continued. All at once, many of the members seemed skeptical. "What could Akatsuki possibly have to give us?" Minor mercenary forces whose members have dwindled down have no place within the workings of this world," shouted one of them in a mocking tone. All of the people except for the masked man nodded. Another added, "You are the reason that the alliance happened. I dare say we shall not make deals with the devil. What if I tell you that you have a large chance to overpower the alliance with our help? A way to tip the scales, so to speak?" asked Madara. Some of the village leaders frowned deeper at Madara's statement. What could this man that stood in front of them give that would give them an edge against the strongest villages? Silence gave Madara the answer that he had wanted. "I have with me 7 of the 9-tailed beasts, and with my ability, I can control them to a certain extent," Madara exclaimed in an air of absolute confidence. The people around him were automatically lured. Everyone then talked about to themselves, contemplating about the proposal that the Uchiha Patriarch had given. Doubts and trust circulated the room like a silent whirlwind, as each member mumbled to the other. Madara then continued as he now stood to the center of each of the following members. The alliance has forces amassing by the thousands, and each village is notorious for the quality, manpower, and resources that they each possess. Even if this federation possesses an army that is more than the total number of forces that the alliance have, it would be utterly useless against the caliber of any ninja coming from one of the villages. Numbers play little value once the enemy have weapons and abilities that can wipe out an area in a matter of seconds. One of the leaders then spoke up. Of course, lending us such creatures of power is by no means free. What is your aim? Madara quipped, straight to the point, I see. Very well. Madara then raised his hands and gave the numerical symbol of 2 on his fingers. I simply want the Raikage's brother and the Rokudaime Hokage, preferably alive. One of the leaders whistled at the incredulity of the man in the middle. Those are pretty high-profile people for a mercenary group to obtain. What are you really after? Madara gave a simple answer. They are Jinchuriki, hosts to the remaining tailed beasts not in my collection. I am merely a collector. I'm fascinated about the mysticism that the bijou entail. Not only that, but using such destructive forces for military purposes is tantamount to madness and genocide. I don't want it to fall into greedy hands. Everyone around the room, excluding the man that stood before them, looked at each other, not thoroughly convinced. I understand that you don't seem to particularly trust me about what is coming out of my mouth, but how about I offer my services free of charge on the first trial? Madara asked. Everyone seemed to tense at Madara's proposal. And when would that be? Asked one of the daimyos. Madara again smiled beneath his mask. Now he had them on the ropes. 3 months from now, I will test it out on the former plains of Wood Country, just south of Earth Country. Decide then, if you want Akatsuki's services or not. Just remember after that, war is declared on any nation that houses Akatsuki. That means that any nation that doesn't go with the alliance shall be declared as either hostile or suspicious. You have been warned. Very well, said one of the village leaders as they now decided upon the situation given to them. As of this moment, the Federation shall declare war on the Alliance and all nations that will oppose the said governing body. Madara felt that his plans were blooming beautifully. Myobokuzen, Sealing Chamber. Naruto was breathing heavily. He was on his last legs of chakra. His sage mode was running out, and to top it all off, the chakra pool of the Kyuubi was now close to the apex of his heart. Pathetic, miserable, weak. All of these traits belong to you. You do not deserve my power, no human ever could. Let the world know, as of right now, the Kyuubi shall once again roam this world in the path of blood. The Kyuubi again swooped down to Naruto, its mouth opening, ready to consume Naruto once again. Naruto could feel the last of sage chakra about to leave his body, as the waters were about to consume. The Kyuubi, like a maelstrom, swept through the waters, charging like a tsunami towards him. Waters gushed out of its way, splashing about. But the Kyuubi stopped, mere inches from Naruto's position, who was panting. He looked to the waters below as it receded back. Slowly he stood up to the frozen form of the Kyuubi no Yuko. Naruto looked at its eyes that were constricted, filled with maddening rage and surprise. I would prefer if you hadn't used my gift to you, Naruto-kun. Turning to his back, Naruto was surprised to find none other than Uchiha Itachi walking slowly to his side. You trying to confront the Kyuubi finally mean that Sasuke has not yet returned to Konoha and has been told lies by Madara. It is such a terrible fate that you will have no other choice but to fight him. Itachi closed his eyes for a moment of silence and lamentation, before stepping forward and touching the Kyuubi by its snout. My gift to you is made up of 2 parts, this is the first one. I impart to you at first the essence of the Uchiha's spiritual energies. Some of my chakra has already leaked into your system before when you were under my genjutsu back then. This will be the final jumpstart to produce the same chakra as did the Rikudo Sannin, albeit on a much larger scale. This would allow you to control the Kyuubi far easier than any other human has come to possess, even more so than Uchiha Madara himself and the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. Chains had suddenly popped from the waters below, as it latched itself on the 9-tailed fox and was instantly subdued. As it was held down on the ground in a yip of pain, the Kyuubi looked at the Uchiha and then to its host. Contempt was present all around the kitsune. The second part of my gift will be for a later time. Welcome to your second coming, Uzumaki Naruto, or should I say, Rikudo Sannin. With that, Naruto was immediately pulled back from the cage and was suddenly brought back to the outside world. Outside world. The sealing chamber's barrier died down, as the tiny, black ball that had surrounded the feral form of the Hokage. As the ball shattered in a surge of chakra, Shima, Fukasaku, and Gamakichi were tense. Who would come out of that dark shell of chakra? Would it be Naruto, or the miniature form of the Kyuubi? There stood Naruto, kneeling on the ground staring up at the sky. Blood was gushing out from every pore of his body. A grimaced expression escapes his face as he slowly fell down to the ground. With a small thud, Naruto looked up towards the night sky, in a shower of stars and the gentle glow of the moon at the dome's center. Naruto felt his eyes close slowly, as the embrace of sleep welcomed him with open arms, with one last thought that came of mind before unconsciousness settled in came to mind. Thank you, Itachi. A small smile escaped his bloody lip. For this night, he had claimed victory over the monstrous fox that many have feared for all their lives. Chapter 12, Rising Force. Naruto was pulled from the cage of the Kyuubi, taking him back to the realm of reality. All the while, the passive Uchiha that stood by the gate stared at the malicious form of the Kyuubi no Yuko. This is the most befitting form of subjugation to one such as yourself, Kyuubi, Itachi mentioned, as the Kyuubi growled in contempt at the human that stood before it. What perpetuates hatred? What denotes peace? This has been on my mind since I was a child, growing up in the chaos of the battlefield. I grew up to be a peace lover, upholding the teaching of the Senju about their ideas of the will of fire, their indescribable unity and harmony. I was awed by the Sandaime Hokage's sense of wisdom and his ideology rather than listen to my father's words. Senju and Uchiha. For a long time that crevice was what separated Konoha as a whole. Rivaling families that isolate each other in a form of discrimination that utterly destroyed our home from the inside out, bridges that are made of ropes that do not remain for long, but now, there's a strong bridge that I can finally see that will reach across. It is through him that I see that it can be possible. This is why I chose Naruto to impart an imprint of my spiritual energy and test out my theory. He is my last fail-safe plan. As we are the descendants of the Rikudo Sannin, it is through us that we will one day come to understand one another, as what our progenitors wish. Not as the descendants of the Uchiha and Senju, but as the legacy of the Rikudo Sannin himself. Naruto had stared upwards on the ceiling of his room as he thought of the words that Itachi had said to him before. What did he mean by new Rikudo Sannin? Naruto sat from his bed that night and got out of the small hut that Shima and Fukasaku stayed in. Once he got out, he headed for the nearest cliffside and sat down at the edge, staring into the cold night sky. Can't sleep, Naruto-chan? Asked a familiar voice. Naruto turned around and saw Fukasaku was up as well. The old toad was sitting near his side as well. Naruto shook his head no. I was bothered by what happened during the moments of my facing with the Kyuubi. Does it have to do with the obtained control over it? Asked Fukasaku. In a way, yes. I want to know what exactly was Itachi saying about me being the new Rikudo Sannin, that and how come I can control the Kyuubi better. Naruto muttered. He then remembered the harsh words of the Kyuubi directed to him, mocking him and insulting him, ridiculing his ideals that it even involved Jiraiya's memory. Naruto could feel himself get angry by the moment. It may be just a speculation on my part, Naruto-chan, but I believe it has something to do with the fact that the Uchiha and the Senju were the direct descendants of the Rikudo Sannin himself. Fukasaku answered as he put his front legs on his back as he stared into the white moon that illuminated the night. We know that the origin of the Bijuu came from the day that the Rikudo Sannin had split of the power of the Jubi into 9 different creatures, and that the descendants of the Rikudo Sannin have shown capability in controlling the tailed beasts, given the records of the battles between Uchiha Madara and Senju Hashirama. Fukasaku continued as Naruto nodded in understanding. If it came to that, those two had something in common yet different from the Rikudo Sannin. It is said that the direct descendants of the Rikudo Sannin inherited parts of a whole, as they say, the spiritual energies of the Uchiha, and the physical energy of the Senju. Naruto then raised his eyebrow in question as Fukasaku continued, as you know, those are the energies that make up chakra. And if anything were to go by when involving something ambitious as, say, splitting the Jubi apart, then chakra would be the most obvious thing that would be contaminated in each of the existing Bijuu. Simply put, the chakra that the Rikudo Sannin had used on the Jubi could have had a seemingly intended side effect of the descendants showing control to the Bijuu whose genes were strong enough to manifest. In this case, it was Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara. One who can control the Bijuu using his life force, the other using chakra directed from his eyes. That contamination of chakra from the Rikudo Sannin to the Bijuu is what probably allowed you to control the beast within you. But it still hasn't explained about me being what Itachi said. I didn't have the slightest sliver of talent that allowed me to control my beast. Fukasaku shook his head. Think about it, Naruto-chan. The only thing consistent about the gifts that each of the brothers had was the Rikudo Sannin's chakras. As time passed, many of his traits either dwindled or varied to another. The only thing that remained consistent coming from him were the chakras that were separated. It remained as the single most consistent trait that each of the clan's possesses. And it probably still continues to this era. Itachi-san must have been questioning the same thing. Fukasaku then continued, however, compared to the real Rikudo Sannin, your chakra is somewhat only a copy, and no matter how much a plagiarist is good in copying a work, it will still have a different structure inside. Do you understand? You are a living hypothesis, a theory waiting to be proven. Unless you get to control the Bijuu itself with the chakra given to you, I cannot say that it will work flawlessly, as it cannot be proven until we can test it. The existence of the Rikudo Sannin in ages past was filled with mystery and near mythical in nature, so it would be very hard to prove that with a chakra signature that is as close to the Sannin as possible that you can control the Bijuu. I think I get it now. Thanks, Fukasaku-sensei. It really cleared my head there. Naruto said with small smile escaping his lips. The elder toad smiled to the blonde as well, before looking out towards the night sky. This time, it was the elder's turn to ask Naruto, have you found out the answer in your quest yet, Naruto-chan? Naruto shook his head as he continued to look out. No, I haven't. I'm still looking, but I'm sure I'll find it someday. Naruto let out a melancholic smile. As he stood up and walked back towards the hut all the while, he muttered, someday. As he stared at the night for the last time, he could feel that something edged closer and closer every day. Something big was about to happen, and a feeling of anxiety escaped inside him every day. Kumo. Killer E stood at near the window of his office by the cliffside. He looked down below to where his subordinates had begun moving through the bustling city of the most powerful shinobi village as of now. Kumo was getting edgy. 4 months had passed since the signing of the treaty and the full establishment of the alliance of 6 nations, and the elemental countries since then grew in a silent but hostile environment. It was an uneasy feeling, as villages all around the Godaikoku began to cut off trade routes everywhere, stockpiling resources left and right, with traveling merchants beginning to dwindle by the start of the 4th month. The Hokage viewed his troops assembling before the entrance to his building. The man looked on his back to see Dari kneeling before him with his brother, who had his hands on the back of his head. Hokage-sama, the troops that you have requested have arrived. The Hokage merely nodded and silently went out. Dari, curious of the behavior of the Hokage, was about to ask, that is, until Killer Bee had interjected. Yo bro, why so gloom? It's as if you're walking to your doom. The Hokage stopped and looked back to his brother just before he opens the door. You have known just how much I have loved my village and my country more than anyone. That's why I wanted to create a strong nation, to oppose those that try to trample our people, our pride. It is a strength that I wanted to attain ever since I was a mere chunin, after discovering the news of a monstrous shinobi that existed in Konoha during the Third Great Shinobi War. I grew fearful of the day that Konoha might one day turn their sights here. I realized just how the strong dictate this world. But now, the Hokage raised his right hand as his gauntlet was slightly shown with the sleeves sliding down. The Hokage looked at his hand as if it was something worth to be disgusted about, and said, "It seems that even the strong can be opposed and loathed at most. I've realized that the mistake that I caused of focusing solely on our country, and causing such crimes everywhere." It was then that the Hokage continued, "But it didn't mean that I should wallow in that guilt. There is not a day after the summit that I wish for this war to have never happened. But it has, so I have no other choice but to fight in it. I am the Hokage after all, and putting up a weak front for my people to see would be a reason for my fall." The Hokage then raised his right hand, as he said to his younger brother, "If we win this war, I can give you that vacation you've always wanted. Just don't get out of our sights, your impulsiveness could very well damn us all." The Hokage then turned his back and faced the door. "Now let's get out there, and we're going to give an ass-kicking like we've never done before, as the strongest nation there is." Fired up by his speech, the Hokage didn't bother to open the door and instead had charged through it like a mad bull, shattering and sending splinters all around the hallway outside. Derry merely sighed as he grabbed a small piece of paper and began scribbling notes as B stood up, shrugging as he walked towards the place where his brother was going to. Derry sighed again and placed the note on the Hokage's desk and walked out. Really, giving morale to a courier mission to Konoha was needlessly necessary. Konoha. It was as predicted, or so Tsunade thought. Intelligence reports had started pouring in this morning. It was as Shikaka stated, Akatsuki had most of the minor countries as its sponsors. It started to be obvious when there were sudden intermarriage proposals from the different daimyos that ruled their respective countries. Just about a month ago, many allied minor countries from Suna, Iwa and Kumo broke off from their respective treaties, blocking trade routes to many of the common roads that lead to the different villages. It was one of the reasons why traveling merchants were dwindling around Fire Country. Many of the remaining trade routes weren't safe, or totally improbable to cross. As soon as that happened, many of them clamored for local trade instead, circulating trade and industry around the villages in their respective countries, and what little allies they had left, Suna and Iwa had a particularly hard time. With that in mind, it was getting harder and harder to maintain provisions and stocks while Konoha lay decimated after Pain's invasion. The reconstruction was put to a halt, however, with 30% of the village now back in operations. Konoha was slowly starting to pick up the pieces of what has been the most devastating attack since the invasion 3 years ago. It crippled them surely, but thanks to well-made alliances with its neighboring countries, trade and industry were certainly circulating well enough on international standards, so the hurt of embargoes from the more distrustful countries was surely eased by that predicament. Tsunade had breathed a sigh of relief after that. At least her workload reduced to half for the meantime. The only thing she had to sign were authorization letters for the village reconstruction and supplies for reactivating the shinobi wartime program. All shinobi within the active roster must have an intense training regimen for at least 2 months and must in accordance master an offensive type jutsu, and at least know basic life support, first aid and 1 healing jutsu. Tsunade cracked a smile at this. Sarutobi had finally authorized her proposal after all these years. It was one thing that Tsunade finally gave a relieved smile. The invasion 3 years ago served as a warning to her, and now it felt right that at least their ninja were more prepared now. Better equipped, and have higher chances of surviving than they did before. As soon as she slumped back from her chair for some rest from the headaches produced by paperwork and her successor's goofy tendencies to leave his post, albeit for legitimate reasons, Tsunade rubbed her temples in annoyance. "Retired Godame my ass, I swear that brat just wants to make me suffer from this insufferable amount of work," she yelled, as she leaned back on her chair. A sudden barge through the door had interrupted her relaxation time, however. Go Dame-sama! Shouted her assistant as the said woman turned around in surprise. Shizen shouted, from the top of her lungs. Takigakure has just been invaded by Kusugakure. Alarmed at the sentence left by her apprentice, Tsunade's eyes widened in disbelief as she pushed herself away from her desk, stood up, and shouted. What? When did this happen? Reports ushered in this morning. We don't exactly know the details of how many shinobi were sent by Kusugakure, but it could border to about 1,000 troops deployed. Tsunade then balled her hands into fists. A distinct popping sound was heard as the Godame shouted in fury, send scouts and check the border for any signs of hostile units and monitor the situation. Secure the areas to our allied neighboring countries, particularly Wave. I don't want those bastards cutting off trade routes from any of the remaining allied countries that we have. Shizen saluted and dashed out of her office. Tsunade sat back into her chair in deep thought. This attack was provoking Konoha to take action, and Tsunade was being tempted dangerously close to letting it happen, but she knew she can't act unless the order was given by the Supreme Commander, who is entitled to command all the forces from 6 villages. If she were to act now, then this would serve as a bad reputation towards Konoha as a whole and to the commander itself. Acting independently would force the remaining Kages to act on their own as well, plunging the Godaikoku to chaos. She could feel the tense atmosphere escaping through the air at the moment, as her heart started beating faster. She could literally feel it, the feeling that she had years ago, an anxiety that she never thought she would face again. That fragile peace that kept this continent together for the last 20 years or so was about to be shattered once again. It was the beginning of war. IWA. Ryu Tenbi no Inoki, feared leader of IWA, walked in front of his men, assessing them like an ever-vigilant watchdog. His brows were close to meeting each other, as he leaned in closer to the men that stood straight. When news of a massive embargo had occurred throughout Earth countries, remaining allies surrounding it along with a sudden arms race all around, Inoki could feel perturbed at how risky the alliance was. It was probably one of his reasons for not agreeing with it. Why not just trade information with the remaining villages itself? It would have worked all the same and not risk economic and political disasters all around the world. Now, this kind of disaster has struck, all because of the ruling of fear and bigotry that existed in every human. Inoki shook his head. None of their former minor allies would believe the sole reason why they wanted to create the alliance in the first place. Fools! The lot of them, Inoki muttered under his breath, as his comment went unnoticed to one of his guards, Akazuchi. What are you talking about, old man? Inoki merely turned his head towards the said to her. I meant that those people that had put their trust in Akatsuki, supporting that madman's ideals, goals, and ambitions. I cannot fathom as to what kind of lies did that man sputter out to the minor countries for them to act like this. What about you, Kuratsuchi? How do you see this war? Kuratsuchi merely bowed her head and asked, Why are you asking me this, old man? Humor this old man, would you? Inoki replied as he then began to walk up the stairs that led to his office slowly. I think it's pointless, said Kuratsuchi. Inoki merely stopped at that sentence as his female guard continued. I think all war is pointless. There's no sense of victory when everything is over. You said back then, old man, that no nation benefits in war. There is no definitive gain in battle but terrible losses on all sides. In the end, winning is but a hollow thing. Inoki smiled and said to her, I taught you well, Kuratsuchi. You may become my successor yet. Kuratsuchi smirked and added, Don't be such a prude and just give me my title, old man. No. Inoki answered simply as Kuratsuchi stared at the old man who was looking away from his subordinate. There are still many things that I must do for this world, many more things that I must atone for. I regret the fact that we were the first to use the Jinchuriki program. I regret the fact that I neglected Han and left Rishi alone. Perhaps, on the road as being Tsuchikage, I lost myself on the way. Before my time ends, I wish to atone for all of the mistakes I've made. Regrets are the last thing I want on my grave. With that, the Tsuchikage had walked up only to find an utterly painful stabbing-like pain on his hips. Ugh! My hips! Kuratsuchi sighed, the feared leader of Iwagakure, now reduced to this. Shaking her head, she assisted the old man up, blocking out any protest coming from their beloved leader. But never could it be said that she was not worried about the gamble that the Alliance had made to their supreme commander. What she hoped for, at least, was that this war would not be a slow and painful one. Unknown location. It was dark, hazy, and damp. Tiny droplets of water fell and resonated within the near pitch-black color inside the cave. Faint wisps of chakra escaped from within, dancing into the air before quickly vanishing. Seek not penance for the wicked, walk the path of vengeance, and you shall find that karma seeks retribution. None must stand in their way, even God. And should you encounter him on your journey, God shall be cut. The black half of Zetsu commented, eyeing the unmoving form of Uchiha Sasuke, as the said Avenger stood erect with hands clasped together as if in a prayer. Eh? What does that mean? Asked the white half. The black then commented. To walk the path of vengeance means to tread the path of blind hatred and destruction. A curse as to one what might say, that even the gods shall not ever seek redemption on his soul. It was then that Sasuke opened his eyes and the Sharingan flared to life, its 3 tomos spinning madly on its blood-red iris, contorting and reforming to change into a 6-pointed star shape of the Manjikyu Sharingan that somehow gained the 3 crescents like black waves around the pupil. Sasuke's left eye bled, as it spouted forth spontaneously the black flames as hot as the sun shooting out in the field of his vision. The everlasting flames of Amaterasu crept forth to where Sasuke's vision was, as the flames that left his vision dissipated. Sasuke closed his eyes, fully suppressing the black flames of the named sun goddess. In a span of half a year, Tobi stood impressed over the progress of his new puppet. Uchiha Sasuke progressed on an unprecedented rate. His expected 6-month plan for Sasuke was reduced to a total 5 months and gained a new summon to his arsenal for a bonus. Granted, with this much time reduction in his training program, Sasuke would be prone to do anything that he wanted. Madara hadn't foreseen this. He hadn't realized Sasuke's how drive meant so much to him. My choices are my own, Sasuke had mentioned, turning to face Zetsu. I'm not blind enough to kill people that don't stand against me. Those who wrong my family shall receive what is rightfully theirs. If they fear the power of the Uchiha this much, then I'll be their fear's incarnation. With this, Sasuke turned his back on Madara and approached his sleeping chambers. I never expected the brat to be this fast in reacquainting himself with the Sharingan. He's even fully controlled Amaterasu again. Tobi shook his head, but compared to Itachi, who had the ultimate genjutsu, Sasuke doesn't have the power to alter the perception of time with his Sharingan. Tobi then continued, it is truly a great difference between the two, Sasuke, who has full control of the ultimate katan, and Itachi, who wields the most powerful genjutsu. No matter what, those two are like the sun and the moon. Zetsu's white half then asked, now that Sasuke has earned full control of that Manjikyu, he'll demand more coming from you, Madara. He's like a hungry lion in a den, he can't be tamed. That is probably one of my most disturbing concerns, Zetsu. I simply can't let Sasuke slip at the most crucial moment of these events. But I can't let his training drag on lest he wants to betray me. Powerful I may be, but I need Sasuke to further my plans and use Gedo Mazo to ascend. Zetsu's black half then said, your promise to me for a land, you still haven't forgotten, have you? Tobi chuckled beneath his mask. Of course, Zetsu, you aren't being left out. Just remain alive after this war is over and you'll be receiving what is due to yours. Good, his white half said. In their brief silence, only the drops of water were heard inside the cave, with each man left to ponder to their own thoughts. 1 month later, Naruto looked back to his masters that had guided him throughout the period of 6 months. Naruto, before you leave, I must warn you about something, Fukasaku mentioned, looking grim. That jutsu you created 1 month ago. I've seen you practice it. I advise that you don't use it unless you really are in a bad situation. The fourth was smart enough to leave behind notes and principles to his jutsu. However, compared to your version, it's basically impractical. Naruto merely replied with a small grin, I'm not one to break promises, Fukasaku-sensei, so I won't tell you that I will not use it under any circumstance. Fukasaku shook his head, I just hope that you know the gravity of the price to be paid for that specific jutsu. With that, Naruto gave a thumb up with a smile. I don't plan on dying early. Unless I find that answer, I'll still be here, even if it takes me an eternity. With that, Naruto vanished in a poof of smoke. Eastern Sea, boundary between Lightning Country and Water Country. The landmass that separated Lightning Country and Fire Country were comprised of nations that were part of the newly established Federation, with the normal routes being blocked off from the differing states all around. Courier missions were now being conducted by sea to Water Country, then to Fire Country. Since the minor countries saw this as an act of defiance, the landmass that's situated near the Sea of Water Country created intercepting ships that patrol within its area of responsibility. So much as a small ship enters its seas would be utterly destroyed before arriving to Water Country. The wreckage couldn't afford to take the initiative. It might cause the rest of the minor countries to retaliate, even as the strongest nation of the continent. Prudency with a knife tucked under the sleeve just in case was still one of Kumo's main approaches to politics. Olmo looked on with an anxiety on his face. The countless ships that stood before him made him take a gulp of his own saliva. His nervousness shone. He gripped his sword tightly with his right hand. The ships rocked to and fro in the dark night. As the full moon's reflection shimmered on the water along with the stars, Olmo couldn't help but feel that something was about to go wrong. Then, as he looked to his right, he could see another fleet coming from the east. Just as he peered in closer, he could see globes of little orange lights that came from each ship. Olmo could suddenly feel his anxiety turning into fear. The air around their fleet made the tension thicken so much that Olmo could feel like he could cut it, and feel the resistance to his blade. Just then, strips of orange wisps began arching to the sky, coming from ships that as far as Olmo can see. Like meteors crashing to earth, the wisps of what is now clearly fire rained down on the ship that Olmo and his team were currently riding, as a barrage of flaming arrows began piercing the ship. Olmo loudly cursed as he began to run inside to get his teammates, and at least devise a way to stave of those unholy objects that started to burn the mast of their ship. Karui, Samui! Get up! It's an attack! Standing in alarm, the two females awoke from their beds, grabbing their equipment and heading outside. The three Nins were met with a blazing wall of fire that danced around them. The sailors that maintained the ship were in frenzy, getting the wounded out and putting out the flames. Karui stood impassive as she watched two men carry a dead member of their crew, with one sailor cursing and on the verge of tears as he shouted out his friend's name. How could they sneak up on us like this? What happened to our lookouts and interceptors? Samui shouted. Karui looked sharply at the brown girl and said, Now isn't the time for finding out about our lookouts. We need to suppress the fire and let this ship remain afloat. As the members of the team began helping the crew in putting off the flames, a large, almost thunderous explosion shattered the lower part of the ship's bow, sending burnt, or still burning splinters in every which way. Samui suddenly realized that it was the direction Karui had run into earlier. The eldest of Killer Bee's students watched in shocked horror as she hit the deck, the sounds of people screaming inside the vessel. She struggled to get up as the ringing in her ears continued to screech. It was then that one of the sailors had walked towards her, while shouldering a slightly burned but nonetheless breathing Karui. Olmo had then jumped down towards them, grabbing Samui and resting her arm on his shoulders. The ship is tilting downwards. We need to get away now, Samui. Karui. Carry her instead of me. I'm still conscious. I can get up on my own in a minute. We don't have time for that, Samui. The ship's bow is taking a huge amount of water. I can carry you both instead. It was then that the sound of a bell began clanging from the main cabin of the ship. The Taicho has ordered to abandon ship, shouted the first mate. As soon as that statement was announced, dozens of the sailors jumped into the cold sea water below, with the ship now standing diagonally with its rudder at the peak of its height, with the bow submerged below. Damn those Federation bastards, attacking an unarmed cargo vessel, merciless cowards, Olmo said as he hefted Karui on her back while Samui held on to her teammate's shoulder as he stood on the surface of the water. Damn it, and in the middle of the sea. The others won't be able to pick us up fast like this, Samui muttered under her breath as she saw in front. Shinobi charging from their respective vessels jumped down and ran towards their opposing vessels. Samui, now recovering from the impact of the explosion, stood on the water surface as well. We'll need to get these sailors to safety first. Omoy, carry Karui to one of the ships, make sure that ship is away from the battlefield and is out of range, preferably one that will reach water country faster. Then come back here and help me carry as much as possible. Omoy nodded before taking a step. He looked back at his team leader and asked Samui, "What do you think could have caused this kind of attack?" Samui shook her head. It could be anything, either as a statement of defiance, or simply wrong navigation. Either way, we need to get these people out of here. Now go! Omoy nodded and dashed towards the nearest ship he could find. Once he climbed on the ship, he climbed to the captain's deck. Setting Karui down on the nearest wall, he barged in on the cabin and said, "Turn this ship back. There are men overboard just from the north." The captain turned. Old age featured in his face as wrinkles were drawn on his cheek and forehead. Long strands of white hair reached to his shoulders as he wore a gray shahakusho over fishnet armor, tucked in his brown pants. A green sash acted as the belt with a dato nestled on his right hip. "I can't do that, son." Omoy froze for a moment, as the dread of seeing those men that had helped them before die on the frigid waters of the sea. He cringed and then gritted his teeth, before finally regaining his voice to speak. "What do you mean you can't do it? Are you going to let them die like this?" "Son, I can't risk rescuing a crew in the middle of an ambush. Believe me, I want to save them as well, I want to help them. But I don't want to put my men in danger and risk this ship of sinking as well. Ambushes are pretty much unpredictable. There could be ships that we think are on our side and then suddenly, they invade this one like flies to a carcass. If you want to save them, fine. But I'm going to leave it to your hands. People die in wars, it's the rule of battle. You're a shinobi, you should know about this stuff from the get-go." Omoy burrowed his eyebrows and stared at the captain in sheer but silent anger. He clenched his fists and turned around. "And you should know that we don't play by the rules," Omoy said as he ran down and jumped to the waters, his feet landing on the surface and didn't plunge further. "I'm going to save them. Whether you like it or not." With that, Omoy ran towards the place where the ship last sunk. Konoha. As soon as Naruto appeared back in Konoha, he immediately went to a beeline straight to his office. Hearing rumors of invasion, war, and minor countries passed by his ears and could feel the dread escaping from his chest. It was frightening, as if the atmosphere itself was saturated with fear and anxiety enough to even suffocate a man. As soon as he was in his office, Tsunade gladly let Naruto take the reins from her, as she debriefed him of the current situation. Naruto looked at the stacks of paperwork and began to read, frowning and cursing up a storm as he read every mission report, every surveillance report, and every damn thing that occurred throughout the course of 6 months. To his utter shock and disbelief, the minor countries had begun to materialize their fear and distrust towards the major powers, ultimately signing an international treaty for an organization that blatantly opposed the alliance. Naruto cursed under his breath. The situation was leaving a bad taste in his mouth, and even with his return the unease was only slightly lifted. It seemed all too unsure. They had known that even the mightiest warrior can fall in the hands of many, a fact that had stirred them to reality about their leader when Tobirama volunteered to be left behind and distract a numerable number of shinobi. What would happen if it goes like that again? Who will lead them? Who will serve as their leader? Men and women alike looked on wary and concerned to their beloved leaders. After all, even the yondaime, Namikaze Minato, considered being the pinnacle ninja of this era, the seemingly unkillable Yellow Flash fell at the hands of no mere human. He fell in the paws of the menacing Kyuubi. The thought had scared them. After all, if Minato died in battle, then such a thing was even more possible to Naruto, and even more so to Tsunade. "I don't believe this," Naruto said in exasperation, holding his forehead with his right hand and began massaging his temples. "We discussed over this 6 months ago, you shouldn't be surprised," Tsunade mentioned, sitting on the couch right next to the desk. "I know. It's just that I can't believe that what Shikaka mentioned turned out to be true," Naruto answered, leaning back in his chair. "Well, you should. People listen to their fears, their anger and hate. It's the most exploitable and destructive emotion a human can ever have. Sometimes, even talks aren't enough." Tsunade commented as she opened a bottle of sake that had been delivered earlier. Taking a small sip, she looked to the 4 photos framed on the upper wall below the door leading to the hallway. Fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds spite, and spite breeds wrath. I've learned that from the pervert and from my grandfather. Perhaps Jiraiya had the sentiment of being human out of the 3 Sannin. He was chauvinistic, but he had a deep understanding of being alive. Mercy was his biggest downfall, but mercy well placed. Tsunade closed her eyes and the image of a young Jiraiya stood before a black pitch of darkness. Yo. I'm Jiraiya, you can send me a love letter later. Naruto smiled as Tsunade smiled on her own. If he were alive right now, he would be so happy that you were thinking about him. I wonder why you didn't seem to see him that way. Naruto remarked. Tsunade had a smirk on her face. That's because friends usually don't. Jiraiya even realized it somewhere down the line. Besides, what kind of woman would want an open skirt chaser? Tsunade remarked with a smirk. Naruto laughed a little. Well, I can't blame him for being like that. Being dumped over and over again could do that to a guy. Naruto answered. Tsunade raised her eyebrow at her successor. I thought it was the exact opposite. Then again, Jiraiya wasn't exactly the norm. You, on the other hand, are different yet, not of the norm as well. Tsunade smirked and pointed to the Rokudaime. What? Naruto looked on innocently. I heard from Sakura about what happened with the Mizukage. She seemed overly forward with you. What exactly did Sakura tell you? I mean, aside from the constant flirting she's giving me, which I'm pretty sure is just an infatuation, there was only political business with the whole event on the summit, well, aside from the whole interruptions that occurred. Naruto narrowed his eyes to his predecessor. Oh, so that's what they're calling it these days, is it? Political business. Naruto, slowly catching on Tsunade's tirade, raised his eyebrows. Uh-huh, and you're suspecting me of being into older women? Naruto questioned. Oh, I'm not implying anything. It might be that the Mizukage just likes younger boys, eh? What was it that Jiraiya said again? A Shotokan? She gave a grin that spread from ear to ear as Naruto paled and suddenly turned to different shades of red. Oh, fuck you, Bachan. You know it's only business, and that's the way it's going to be. I've got a village to run. Naruto retaliated, causing Tsunade to burst out laughing. Damn it, Naruto. I never knew you were this fun to tease. Naruto growled at that, his eyebrows now narrowing closer and closer, until a sudden barge from the door placed his guard up, as did Tsunade. Hokage-sama. Danzo has escaped. Naruto smirked inwardly. It was time to take this plan into motion. Earth Country, southern border, former Wood Country. Madara stood on the grassy plains that were just outside the village of Wood Country. He looked around, and found no patrols on sight. Upon knowing the coast was clear from Zetsu, Madara's visible eye contorted, showing his smile underneath his mask. It's time, Zetsu, stand back. I think it's time to show the minor countries the toys that I'm allowing them to use. With that, Madara clasped his hands together in a hand seal and molded his chakra. The wisps of blue energy circulated around him, creating an updraft force. He then grabbed a single kunai and slit his right thumb, drawing blood. Going for the 5 hand seals required to perform Kuchiyos no Jutsu, Madara slammed his hands on the floor, and the summoning circles stretched to the ground. In an enormous amount of smoke, a grotesque monster that had 9 eyes with its head pointing upwards and its hands cupped together at the base of the palm, it gave a menacing growl and opened its mouth. Acrid white smoke escaped it, as it flew to the air and danced in the winds. Madara spoke. I don't need Geto Mazo to sync with a person when I go out and release a bijou for a limited time. That's more of a sealing purpose for the Hachibi and Kyubi. Sasuke won't be satisfied until he completes his quest, but it doesn't mean that I have to postpone my plans any longer than I should have. It's a shame I couldn't fully bring him to our side and had to go look for the elders, but that is neither here nor there anymore. Eventually, Naruto and Sasuke would clash, and eventually, the result shall be the same, me ascending to my rightful place as the Jinchuriki of the Jubi. Madara then went to the right palm of the seemingly petrified monster and said, 4 tails would do nicely. Madara nodded, and soon, the monster began to growl as it made a somewhat regurgitating sound. Chakra exploded into the air, like rushing water from a fountain, as the menacing chakra of the tailed beast of Madara's choosing began to take on a physical form. The four-tailed giant monkey faded into existence and growled about. Madara hoped into its forehead, as his eternal Manjikyu flared to life. The beast growled and finally roared, letting out an ear-piercing screech as it began to wildly thrash about. Madara calmed it down with the mere presence of his chakra. The aged man then jumped over to its head and stood there with his hands clasped in the seal of the ram. I only have a full 10 minutes before this wears me down. I need to do a lot of damage as possible. Madara muttered to himself as the eyes of the four-tailed beast glowed in an eerie and ominous red streaking as its head turned. Chakra began to condense from the monster as tilted its head upwards before finally spewing out lava from its mouth to the ground. The trail of molten rock ravaged the ground as it rapidly burned trees and set ablaze anything in its path. The said-tailed beast let out another screech as it crouched down growling at the small village below. It sprinted its down to the village like a rabid dog, eager to cause destruction. Madara thought solemnly, as the village below began to be lit up in flames. Today would be raining blood. With Taka. It was hot, too hot. Suigetsu looked like he was ready to die from the humidity. Suigetsu, being made up of mostly water, didn't find it all amusing that they had to trek to the tropical parts of the world in order to look for two old people. The fact that he was hefting Kubikiri Hocho didn't help at all. The birds say that two aged people were seen just to the south of here, a small town, probably there to restock and resupply. Sasuke merely continued his walk. Suigetsu felt the need to grab one of his numerous water bottles and decided to drink. Damned heat, damned humidity. I can't seriously think of anything productive under this weather, said Suigetsu, taking another gulp from his water container. Quit your damn complaining, you kappa. It's far too early for your whining. If it wasn't for Sasuke, I would have. Karen was suddenly cut off from her speech when she suddenly felt another presence near them. Karen could feel the malice coming out from the man. It came in waves. It also came into a feeling she hadn't felt before. Insanity. I see that we meet again, Sasuke-kun, said the voice, jumping to a rock with his face covered. The man chuckled darkly as it turned to full-blown laughter. Sasuke looked at the mysterious figure and recognized the voice. Kabuto. Sasuke merely stated as Kabuto removed his hood with a wide smile on his face. The skin on his cheeks were peeling away, as his irises were now gold with a slit as the pupil. Right you are, Sasuke-kun, said the man, as he now leaned forward, staring at the impassive Uchiha straight at the eye. What are you doing here? Asked Sasuke. Oh, I was just trying to find you. I never knew how hard it was to track down Akatsuki members. Taka is not part of Akatsuki, nor will we ever be. Sasuke mentioned. Kabuto seemed to think otherwise though. Oh? Rumors say another thing. But enough about that, let me tell you what I want from you. Kabuto sneered this time, as his body nose slithered its way down the rock, much like that of a snake. I came here to take my revenge on you. For killing Orochimaru-sama. Kabuto mentioned. Sasuke withdrew his blade from the scabbard and said, Interesting. Let me see if your hatred surpasses mine. Suigetsu, Karen, let's step back. Jugo mentioned. The two behind the large man nodded. Lightning crackled from Sasuke's blade as it screeched loudly from the discharge of the electricity. Begone, wretched snake. Sasuke commanded, shooting his Chidori Aisu, 1,000 birds chirping longsword, straight to the adjutant of the deceased snake Sannin.